Hi, I'm Heather Weintraub, and I'm doing a study on perspectives of study of gluten-free diets for patients with Alzheimer's disease. Here is where I'm going to start with Alzheimer's disease and what it is. Alzheimer's disease is a disease that affects the brain, causing dementia and cognitive disorders in elderly patients. We don't know what causes AD, but we do know that it can be diagnosed by NFTs and adenoid senile plaques. About 60 to 80% of all dementia in Alzheimer's patients. So not all dementia, but a good majority of dementia patients do have Alzheimer's. We do care about how AD is on the rise. They live longer, and the more likely we are getting AD is because AD is a disease that affects the elderly. We don't know where it comes from, but there are many debates on whether it's genetic or if it's a combination of the environment or genetics. AD affects the patients, of course, but it's a burden on the family, and it's traumatic. It's traumatic for the community, and it's also a costly disease. Here is what gluten is. Gluten is a substance that is found mostly in grains, wheat, and wheat. It's responsible for the texture of dough. Also, there is celiac disease. That is a disease that is caused moderately to severe illness in the patient or people's diet of the digestive system. Gluten has been shown to affect parts of the body, mostly the digestive system to the brain, due to proteins that are interacting. There are a few studies on gluten-free diet that contain the Alzheimer patient, but there is literature showing a connection between the gut and the disease. Here is some evidence that supports the claims. On one of the studies that I came about is that elderly patients take longer to be diagnosed and have a point here that is that much lower rate of diagnosis for celiac disease. So the point here is that many AD patients could have celiac disease, and we just don't understand the diagnosis. In study 2, as I came about, those with dementia had a higher rate of celiac, but unfortunately they did not find this in the case. This does not support my theory, but it also does not rule out that gluten-free diets would not help. In the third study, it talks about proteins being misfolded by the gut, which causes plaques and lesions seen in AD patients. It doesn't talk about gluten, but it provides a connection between the gut and the brain. The fourth study links with gluten sensitivity to inflammation in the brain, specifically in the nervous system, which we would know is a problem for AD patients. Lastly, there's a lot of information that talks about it, but we can't talk about it in 8 minutes. But it provides many specific bacteria in the gut, and that it is related to celiac disease, which contributed in AD patients. Therefore, on this background information, it is reasonable to assume that gluten-free diet has an impact on AD patients. Now to find out what that is. Here is my hypothesis, my research hypothesis, and my null hypothesis. The research hypothesis that I came about was Alzheimer's patients on gluten-free diet progress slower than Alzheimer's patients on a non-gluten-free diet. The null hypothesis is that Alzheimer's patients on a gluten-free diet process the same rate as Alzheimer's patients not on a gluten-free diet. Here on slide 6 is how we are going to test this. We are only going to take patients that are testing as a mild in an 0 to 18 range. What DSRS stands for is Dementia Severity Rating Scale, which was developed in the University of Washington. This survey can be done by patients themselves, and their final indicates the level of severity of their disease. The final scores are 0 to 18, which is mild, 19 to 36 was moderate, and 37 to 54, which is severe. Here is where I'm going to talk about what the test of the patients is and when I'm going to do it. It's going to be in the morning, about 10 o'clock. It's going to take about a week for 1 year, every day, to collect the data. What I meant to say, to clarify it, is that I'll be testing them in the morning because they're more alert, they're more awake, they're not confused, where they can be confused later in the afternoon. How long I'm going to collect the data is once per week for 1 year. The test that I'm going to be using is a t-test. It's unpaired 2-sample t-test. The reason for a t-test is because we are first assuming normal distributing data. If we find it is not normal distributed, we then need to use, which is called the Mann-Whitney U-test instead. But for now, let's assume normal data. Second, the data is independent. We have 2 groups. There are 2 levels, and therefore the proper test is to use a t-test. Here is the study of how many I'm going to be studying. The literature shows that in 1 year, the score drops 4.5 points. For statistical significance, we need the difference of 2 points between the groups. We are only recruiting patients who had a mild of AD less than 18 points, and therefore starting average is about 9 plus or minus 5. Therefore, endpoints are 13.5 for control and 11 for experimental. Here in what I found for the G-Power program, I used a mean of difference between 2 independent means. The type of power was an a priori, and it was 1 tail, and the effect size was 0.05. Once I plugged it in, I got 59 per group minimum and recruited 65 per group because people drop out or they get sick. Here to conclude, the possibility of problems are expected. Patients drop out because they get sick or ill. There's medical comorbidities and that affect the data. Keeping the study double-blind is hard because there's physical food being prepared, and safety is considered for the patients. So here's patient safety to consider. Identifying the patient's information for confidentiality. Make sure that the patient's understanding their participation fully and consent every week so that they still are on top of their participation. Also, patient medical safety. We're not taking any blood. We're not poking them with anything. We're just changing their diet. So there's no harm done. What our goal is to find if the experimental group has a significant slower rate of progression than the control group. What does this mean for science? You could identify at least one non-medical intervention that can help with AD. While gluten is not likely to cause AD, it can help identify further research. And lastly, to conclude, is my references, which you can look up. Thank you for your time.